this is Dr. Novak. I just want to show you that I replaced my light with this new Fluval 3.0 light over the aquarium. It is a full spectrum light at about 2300 lux. And here's the light I was using, and this is $2 light and is about 6,000 Kelvin degrees versus the Fluval light, which is 6,500, and this puts out about 2,000 lux, a little bit less than the Fluval light, but it only costs $2 a light. And as you can see, it's a 6,000 K, which is just a little closer to daylight than the 6,500. This is my settings, and as you can see through the settings that I really don't have very much blue light as part of the spectrum, less than 5%, and in the red light I knocked it down to 25%. And the blue light is something that we didn't have to worry about a long time ago unless you wanted to color up fish. But the blue light is just going to cause you problems with algae, and these new lights today can kind of control you on that, where some of the metal halides basically peaked in the whites and the greens and those colors all in the center of the spectrum, versus the new lights today are the LED lights. When they have a daylight, they have a lot of blue in there, which does cause algae problems in your aquarium. Where the Fluval light, you can actually adjust the different spectrums of light for your aquarium. But what I wanted to bring up and do this video on is not the light, because there's plenty of reviews on the Fluval light 3.0, and there's plenty of reviews that they're adjustable, which you can see I have adjusted mine to suit my tank. And it is highly recommended that you don't have it on 100% for a tank as shallow as mine, which is only 9 inches from the water surface to the surface of the substrate. But the reason I really made this video is to talk about algae and light. And in the next photographs, this is something I got off the internet. This is a nano tank, and apparently the lights are on 7 hours. The plants look great, but still on the rocks and things are algae. And they do a 40% water change every single week, and yet there is still algae in a nano tank. And apparently they use CO2, which I use CO2, but this goes to prove that all aquariums are going to have some sort of algae, especially if you use bright light or high intensity light for your aquarium. And a lot of people recommend for shallow tanks to cut back on the lighting that you're using. Well, on this particular aquarium for experiment, I have the lights on 100% in this shallow tank, which 9 inches is pretty shallow. But I want you to take a look at the tank itself, and you'll see that what algae growth did grow from the previous light that I was using, the LED, it seems to have stopped or been hindered now with knocking out the blue and only using the spectrum that the plants really need for photosynthesis. Now, the good thing about this is you don't have to do 40% water changes. We have a slow-moving plenum I'm using in case you're first time here, and I'm using a BCB basket. Nitrates are low, phosphates are very low. My last test showed 0.11 in phosphates, and this will help. But it's not only that, but also the bacteria that is growing is helping, plus the cleanup crew. But the next thing of it is, as you're looking at this tank, what is it that you see with this tank different than a lot of the YouTube tanks that you see out there that have plants in them? Well, this tank has very slow growing plants. And a lot of these plants can be problematic because they can have a tendency to grow algae on them, such as the Java fern can grow algae on it. The moss can grow algae on it with very bright light. And there's something about this tank is, look at the plants. They're all plants designed for dim lighting. Not high lighting, but dim lighting, or can accept low light conditions. Yet I'm using very high light conditions. And you don't see everything just being overrun with algae. Like I've tried to explain to you, there's a lot of reasons in a freshwater tank we do get algae. One is phosphates. No matter what people try to convince you, you can have nitrates up to 15, 20 parts per million, but if you can get your phosphates down to, 0.1 part per million or something even lower, you will not have as much as an algae problem as other people. But the other thing also is, that's why I did this video, is to show you even the spectrum of light. Eliminate the blue light, give the plants the spectrum of light that they need for their chlorophyll, and which is all the lighting that is between the blue and the red. Yes, they do need some red, and that I have stuck at 25%. But notice that even with this extreme bright light, you don't have a big, huge algae mess. But the next thing you have to look at is, look at the fish load of the tank and compare the fish load of this aquarium to other aquariums that people show you. Some people may have 5 little tetras or whatever, but the parrotfish in here are over 4 inches long. And the tank is loaded full of snails and catfish and cleaner fish, and they consume quite a lot, these parrotfish. But it's only to prove a point that, what point is it to have these planted aquariums if you have to limit yourself on just a few little fish? Now, I can understand that if you're only looking for a planted aquarium and you don't really care anything about the fish. But my videos are about caring more about the fish and not so much the planted aquarium. But this is just to show you that yes, you can do both. You can have a planted aquarium and you can have fish, as long as they're not going to tear them up. We all understand that. I also want to tell you that people make comments of, I don't have any algae. Well, that's false. No matter how much work you do, you are going to have algae. In fact, ADA aquariums, and you have Amano. Amano came up with the Amano shrimp. He didn't come up with that shrimp because he didn't have algae. He had algae in his aquariums. That's why he found that shrimp that ate the algae. So people who say, oh, I have no algae, that's not true. They're just outlying. That's a falsehood. You're going to have some algae. The thing of it is, you look at this aquarium with extremely bright light for its size, and you don't see the whole thing messed up full of algae. It's kept under control by the bacteria, by the right spectrum of light, by using the right fertilizer like CO2 and iron, and you meet a balance in the aquarium. So you don't have to start dimming lights. You don't have to start cutting back on your fish. You don't have to start cutting back on your feedings because you're so scared you're going to add too much nitrates and too much phosphates. There is a balancing act to the aquarium. Now, if you look at this, and these fish are over 4 inches now, and they've grown that big, and they were only about an inch when I bought them. In just a few months, they've grown over 4 inches. And you look at the mass on the parrotfish and all the catfish that are creating waste and everything. This is what I meant by you have to have a balancing act between the microbes that are in the aquarium and the life that lives in it. So, in other words, the available food stuff that's in the aquarium, if it increases, the microbes have to increase to compensate for that. If you have an aquarium where the microbes can't increase, or the cells of the aquarium cannot increase, then you're going to have a out of balance aquarium and end up with a lot of algae problems. And the first thing people do then is start cutting back on nutrients, cutting back on lighting. They start doing other aggressive measures to try to solve the problem. But as you could see, even with the photographs I showed you, even with 40% water changes a week, you still have algae in the aquarium, but you have to keep control of it. And of course, we all know that one way, as you can watch the YouTubes, they do it is by the animal life. They limit the amount of animal life because then they can limit the amount of phosphates and nitrates that are being introduced into the aquarium on a daily basis. This is the reason why I make a plenum, and this is the reason why I make a BCB basket that fits into the canister filter. This is the reason why. Because you can reach a balancing act with extremely bright light and plants. Now, if I decided to add fast-growing plants in this aquarium, they would grow just fine. But it's only 9 inches of water, and those plants would just soon take over the whole aquarium because they would be such fast growing. But I wanted to show you, even with all these slow growing plants, the crypt, the Java moss, the Java fern, even with all these slow growing plants, the Anubias, you can still keep control of the algae problem even with extreme light, because you have designed a situation in your aquarium that becomes balanced. And you must design it so in the future, as that balancing act may change a little bit, you may add a little more food, the fish grow bigger and bigger and bigger like mine have. And as we know, 4-inch fish make a lot more waste than just little 1-inch fish. There's bigger mass here in these two fish. Heck, one of these parrotfish could probably be equal to, 30 or 40 neons. So, you could have quite a fish load in this aquarium that would make it look overcrowded. And even now, some may say, it looks a little overcrowded with fish. But remember, my videos are about fish and fish health more so than the plants, because if you want plants, there's plenty of videos out there that can tell you how to grow plants. But I don't want you to be fooled into thinking that nobody has algae. Everybody gets algae. Even a mono got algae. He had to solve his problems. Even if you use CO2, you're going to have algae. What you need is to control the amount of algae you have so it doesn't get out of whack and destroy your whole aquarium. That's why, with the way I've set up aquariums, they've lasted so long, 10, 20, 25 years, versus other people, which I've watched their videos, and their tank is, let's say, a year old, and they're already talking about, oh, let's change this tank, and I haven't gotten to it, and you can see algae growing on top of the tanks where the brightest of light is. Now, the brightest of light in this aquarium is no more than 2 or 3 inches away from the light source, that close. But as you notice, you don't see all kinds of algae growing all over everything, destroying everything. And these are slow growing plants, so they're not going to use the nutrients in the aquarium as good as plants that are very aggressive and grow very aggressively, and that can clean your tank very aggressively. So I wanted to show you this. I should be getting my new aquarium next week. I will go step by step on how to make a plenum, a slow moving plenum. I'm going to go step by step on everything so everybody can see. But I think that if you look at the aquarium, a lot of people would say, that's exactly what I want. I'm sick and tired of having to turn my lights down dimmer, my plants don't grow as well, or everyone has told me that because I'm getting all this algae, the first thing you have to do is your light source. Just remember, freshwater aquariums, the plants do not need the blue light. They need red light, but you don't have to send the red light up to 100%, because the other light in between the blue and the red and your ultraviolet and infrared, the light that's in between there, the blues and the red, those lights are what makes the plant green, chlorophyll. And it was always thought, and it did work, where if you use the metal halide light, where the spectrum basically was in the greens and yellows and stuff like that, it even had a yellowish green tint to the water. So that represented more of a daylight, like a 5500K. That is considered to be high noon daylight. But if you use a 5500K, the water is going to look a greenish yellow color. And to the eye, it may not be very appealing. So what we try to do is try to get something pleasing to the eye and what will cause photosynthesis. Another thing I've noticed with a lot of these tanks and reading people, your plants only need 6 hours of photosynthesis. That's it. Just like if you go to a nursery and you look at the little stickers, it says this plant takes sun, but it says minimum 6 hours sun. Okay, you'll say it right on the little sticker. Same with aquarium plants. A lot of people I see 12 hours, 8 hours. Plants, if they're photosynthesizing, they're making their oxygen bubbles, they're on the bottom of the leaves and everything, after about 6 hours, that's more than enough. You don't need to go 8 hours, 9 hours, 10 hours. You don't need that. With bright enough light, now, you have to have bright enough light, and you have to be feeding your plants, of course. A CO2 works very good to help them grow and photosynthesize. 6 hours is more than enough. That will help keep the algae problems down too, because once these lights start going dim with this new Fluval, you can set that like a sunset and sunrise, and the CO2 turns off. It only takes a matter of minutes before you could see like the little pearling bubbles coming from leaves actually stop, because photosynthesis is now starting to shut down. So remember that. You only need about 6 hours of real strong light for plants. And that's about it. I see so many times people have their tanks illuminated far too long and come up with too many problems. Or they have an imbalance. And let me tell you this. This is a true story. When I was in China, they had a lake that was dead lake. And we went and looked at this lake, and we did some redox readings in it, and it was a minus 400 on the ORP. And of course, that's the reason the lake is dead. Minus 400, nothing's going to live in it. And the pH was so acidic, it was like 6.2, and nothing could live in it. So what we decided to do is to aerate the lake over in China, and within just a few months, the whole lake turned around. When we did another redox reading on the same lake after aeration, the redox was up to over 200. So it went from a negative 400 to already a positive 200 in the lake. The green lake finally cleared up and was able to sustain fish life once again. So this is the balancing act you're trying to make. So this is something you have to understand, which a lot of people don't understand, is that maintaining a higher redox, and that's why you use the plenum, so you will maintain a higher redox in your aquarium, because deep sand bed aquariums, 3, 4, 5 inches, 6 inches, whatever, the redox is going to get lower and lower as you go deeper in that sand bed, and eventually it collapses. We've seen this time and time again with natural systems where oxygen doesn't get to the very bottom of the lake or pond, and it collapses. Eventually, it just stops working right, and your animal life starts dying, plant life starts dying, and it can't maintain anything in the lake because redox has dropped way too low into negative digits instead of positive. Remember, the more positive your redox is, the better it can have reduction capabilities. Okay, the more positive it is. It's the same thing in saltwater aquariums. The higher that is, the 375, 425 millivolt reading, the better it can oxidize the pollutants that are in the water. The lower that redox is, the less capable it is of oxidizing pollutants. So this is how you get that balancing act. And if you think about it, when you're looking at this aquarium, how do ponds do it? Just think to yourself, they're bright sun, beating down on them all day long, and yet they're crystal clear. How do they do it, and why can't we do it in our aquariums? Well, here's a picture. Here's my aquarium. I have the lights on full blast, 9 inches of water. The tank, as you can see, is crystal clear. How do I do it? Is it magic? Yet I have a heavy fish flow, just like ponds have. So I have a lot of organic and inorganic material in this particular aquarium, just to show you this is the way you get the balancing act between animal life and bacteria life and plant life, just like a pond. You're just recreating a pond and a small little aquarium. How do I do it? If other people were to try this at 9 inches of water and just literally turn the lights on full blast, what do you think would happen over time? The whole tank would turn into a big mess of algae. So this is why I show you these videos, to educate you, to let you see that I'm not scared to show you what's going on with the lighting system and the balancing act. The new tank I'm going to build has a very high powered LED light that I'm getting with it. Okay, very high powered. They claim it's just as high powered as if I were to stick a 400-watt halide bulb on it, which is 18,000 lux. And I'm going to show you with even a very high powered light, you can still keep algae in check and not destroy your whole aquarium. Well, I hope you enjoyed the video. Until next time, this is Dr. Novak.